My first substance was food. So I was bulimic from about 14 till 30 and nobody knew. To calm the anxiousness, I would overeat and purge, and it gave me a sense of control. So I was addicted to the control. With the drinking, I'd wake up every morning and say, I'm not going to drink today. Well, I'm not going to drink till 6 today. Oh, I'm not going to drink till lunchtime today. Some days I managed to not drink, but most days I was drinking. I wish people told you how much love and joy there was in recovery and how much freedom. I thought it was like a long prison sentence, that life was going to be really dull and boring, and actually it's even fuller than it ever was.
Hello and welcome to 12 Steps and 12 Questions. My name is Silvio and I'm an addict. This pod is full of personal and inspirational stories of recovery from addiction. And in every episode I'll ask each guest the same 12 questions about their life, addiction and recovery. Quick warning, there will be some graphic descriptions and a healthy amount of swearing. For this episode, please welcome Fiona.
Hi Fiona, thank you for coming around for this new edition of 12 Steps and 12 Questions. Would you like to introduce yourself quickly, please?
Hi, I'm Fiona. I'm 47 years old and my sobriety date is the 16th of November 2020.
Thank you so much. Now, you said at the beginning, before the recording, that you would like to start with the Serenity Prayer.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Would you like to come in for that?
Sure. Should we say it together?
Sure.
God,
grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. So be it. Amen. Let's get straight to question 1 then, which is, did you have any adverse childhood experiences?
Do you know, I've been thinking about this question and I was reflecting on it. My childhood was pretty normal, I think, for the 80s. I grew up on a farm in Ireland, which my dad also worked. So I'm one of 5. My parents worked hard to give us what they could. You know, we had a nice life. I wouldn't say it was perfect, but it was, you know, they gave us everything they could and they gave us as much opportunity as they could. But I would also say that it was quite codependent relationships at home, quite controlling. My mum was quite strict and had certain standards that she wanted us to meet, you know. There was a lot of perfectionism there that I inherited, really. But yeah, adverse, no. I couldn't say it was adverse. I mean, you know, maybe at times verbally abusive. There was some slapping. Yeah. But I thought that was normal.
I'm imagining, and tell me if I'm totally wrong here, but I'm imagining a sort of quite loud, hurly-burly sort of Irish family with sort of lots of back and forward and a lot of, I suppose, a lot of love on the one hand and but also a little bit of needle here and there.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's like we're both there in the kitchen now. You know, there was cats and dogs. There was, you know, all my siblings, people coming and going, and you know, my mum always had lots of other stuff that she was doing outside of the home, lots of charity work, lots of people that she helped, and we are loud. You know, I'm the middle one, so I always felt like I was never heard, so I just got louder to be. That was my coping strategy. Be a good girl, to stay out of the way of the smacks, and you know, the perfectionism kicked in there. You know, when I think my first addiction was attention. You know, not feeling like there was enough love to go around because there was so many of us.
How was your relationship to your brothers and sisters then?
Yeah, it was funny. I think like they would have considered me a bit of a crybaby, you know, super sensitive, bit of a telltale, you know. My older siblings, I would say, were quite independent of each other. And then my younger 2, they were really close. So I kind of felt like I was this piggy in the middle. And I can feel like the emotion coming up now. I was a happy child, but there was always this feeling of, I kind of have to entertain myself here.
Right, okay.
You know?
It's weird, isn't that? Because, I mean, if there's, 5 siblings all together, and then your mum and dad, and plus all the charity work and this and that, it sounds like it was quite busy, and yet you seem to have felt a bit left to your own devices in one way or another. Yeah,
like I had an imaginary friend, and I would go, my first friend was a 40-year-old lady who lived up the road about 200 metres, and when I was 3.5, I'd beg my mum to go and see her, you know, because she'd give me attention, ice cream, and sweets, and I could play with her son's toys. So like,
that's perfect setup.
Yeah, it was great. I couldn't wait to go. I actually, one time I was begging my mum to go so many times. She's like, no, you can't go today. So I asked her to pretend to be her then. Can we play house and you be the neighbour? And she accommodated me.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Yeah.
But it sounds quite, I mean, all things considered, it sounds actually quite wholesome in that way. Are any of your brothers and sisters in the rooms? Are there any of them addicts or alcoholic?
Yeah, one of my siblings has come into the rooms, and the rest of them are not in the rooms. Yeah.
Not that that's a measure of anything, it's just sometimes interesting to find out when there's so many siblings, whether how that relates to oneself. I, for instance, come from a family where there is no obvious alcoholism or addiction.
Yeah.
I say obvious because there's some behaviors that you can question, but nothing really obvious, and I do feel a little bit like I'm the one who's sort of standing out in that respect.
Yeah. It's interesting because in our family, my parents weren't big drinkers. My dad smoked, but there was no other real, like there was a bottle of each, like a gin, a vodka and a whiskey in the cupboard, but they were only taken out if a guest came. They were never really people who were drinkers. And then us as children, we were all out in discos and drinking. But I guess it's our own interpretations of what went on around us will be very different as siblings. And our own coping mechanisms were very different. So I guess we all have the human condition, don't we? But us who are addicts, we learned to cope differently, or we didn't know how to cope. So we grabbed onto the first thing that made us not feel like this incomplete person.
That really is question too in many ways. What the fun times and the times that you first got hooked, what did that look like? I mean, you come from this background and you were a happy child, you just said yourself. But at some point, something was introduced into your life, be it a drink or a drug or maybe a behavior that changed things.
Yeah. The first thing that I remembered, the first thing that I suffered with was that anxiety about wanting to get things right. I remember that perfectionism coming in. The anxiety was because I was always trying to be happy on the outside and doing my best and working hard. I didn't know how to express those feelings of insecurity on the inside. And so my first substance was food.
Right.
So I was bulimic from about 14 until 30 and nobody knew.
Wow, that's a big deal.
Yeah, it's a long time to keep a secret.
Yeah, exactly.
And because I was very sporty and I never got really big and I never got really small. In my head, I thought I was really big.
Yeah.
But visually to others, it wasn't so obvious. So it was that was my coping strategy. And then I think the first drink I had was at 17. And within the first 1 or 2 nights, when I had it, I was like, oh, now I'm funnier. Oh, now I've got the confidence to talk to that boy who I've been staring at for however many weeks.
Yeah.
But within the first 2 or 3 evenings of drinking, I'd blacked out.
Right.
And I didn't know what that was.
Yeah.
And it was just a short one, but I knew it wasn't right. And then my drinking was lots of fun, but it was always spattered with blackouts.
Yeah. Yeah. We haven't on this podcast spoken enough, I don't think, about food. And it's an area that because it's not my first problem, if that makes sense, which for me has always been stimulants and then alcohol. And not that food has never been an issue, but not like that, So forgive me if I'm being a bit ignorant about it, but the bulimia, how did that start? And what was it about that behavior that gave you something? What did it give you?
Yeah, I'm a bit muddled about the exact... No, I remember the first time I did it. It was basically I'd overeaten. We were at some dinner. They said you could have 2 desserts off the dessert trolley. I was already full. I had them, but I went and I made myself sick. I don't know where I learned it from or what gave me, maybe I'd heard it around a bit. I'd had friends who had eaten disorders, but it just kind of turned into this thing that To calm my anxiety, I would fill my tummy.
Yeah.
So I was really struggling at school at that time. My dyslexia hadn't been diagnosed. And so to calm the anxiousness, I would overeat and purge. And it gave me a sense of control.
Control over your emotions or control about
Control of numbing the anxiety. So I think if you fill your tummy, it hits the vagus nerve and it helps you relax. But I didn't know that at the time. All I knew was I feel anxious, I don't feel good enough, and I'm going to comfort myself by gorging on this food.
Yeah.
And the control is the letting go of it.
Right, okay, I see.
So I was addicted to the control, really.
Yeah.
And that got worse as the exam time came. So by the time I came to the end of my secondary school education, when I was supposed to be at home, I went to boarding school Monday to Friday, but when I came home at the weekends, I was supposed to be doing my study every day. And if the house was empty, I was just binging and purging. So
how did you feel about that at that time? Did you think it was normal, or did you feel like, oh, this is really getting out of hand, I'm feeling terrible about it?
I knew it was I knew it wasn't normal. I hid it for so long. I knew it wasn't normal. Yeah. I was full of shame and I had no self-esteem. My self-esteem was very low, and I would go to bed every night, probably crying, but always swearing and promising to myself that I wasn't going to do it again.
Right.
And then it would be the next day, probably lunchtime, and I'd be off. And some days it might be just, purging my dinner, but some days it would be continuous, whatever I could get my hands on, binging and purging. So it was debilitating. And it was, so now not only am I feeling anxious and worthless, I'm also now full of shame and guilt. And I'm not doing the work I need to do for my exams. So everything is catastrophizing. So it's that unmanageability, really, in another way.
And it also sounds like, it snowballs a bit, doesn't it? Like you just said, from trying to calm the nerves, trying to calm the anxiety, to then adding guilt and shame on top and not being able to stop it, and then the consequences coming. So
yeah. And just like with alcohol or drugs, it was controlling me in the end. My need to be loved was telling me, you've got to look a certain way to be good enough.
Yeah.
You're not good enough the way you look or the way you sound or what your brain is like. You're going to have to fix this thing, look a certain way, and then everything will be okay. So it was like this false hope that if I was a certain size, all of a sudden all my problems would go away.
Yeah, which they didn't.
No. Yeah. Until I found, so then I don't know if I'm going on too far now.
Not at all.
So that was like going on, and then I started drinking. And there was fun times, like you said, Yeah. I had a lot of fun times. I came to London to go to university from the middle of nowhere in Ireland. I was really lucky to get a place. Like, I'm such an all or nothing. I guess that was my first geographical, really. On the Monday, I thought I was going back to repeat my exams. By the Wednesday, my bag was packed and I was in London.
Oh, wow.
And the course was something I was really interested in, but maybe a bit more sciencey than I'd expected. Yeah. And the nightlife was amazing. It was the late 90s.
Yep.
It was my university had a major club attached to it, which I got a job in, and I was away.
Perfect. Yeah.
So
did the drinking impact on the bulimia? In other words, did it almost replace the bulimia, or did it run at the same time?
So the drinking and the bulimia were running at the same time. And in my first year at uni, I was again in that panic mode that I'm in over my head. Yeah. I don't know what to do. I was missing class and going to binging and purging. And then I would drink to excess because I wouldn't have maybe eaten that day, and I was in blackout.
Right.
So it's this snowball effect. So now I'm doing that thing where I always say I relayed my addictions, but that was a bit later on. Like now I've got two major addictions going on. Yeah. I'm not drinking every day at this point. Can't afford to anyway.
Yeah.
But when I drank, it was to blackout. Not all the time, but enough. And then I found drugs.
Right.
And then that sorted the blackouts.
Yeah.
And because I was out raving 3 nights a week, I wasn't eating as much. So it was like this new false hope.
Yeah, and it sort of seems to solve problems, doesn't it?
In the beginning, you think it does, don't you?
I certainly did as well, with... I've often talked about it on here, haven't I? With... Even though I'm an extrovert, I'm still quite shy about certain things, and I might not be confident even speaking to women, or to certain type of women or something like that. And amphetamines making me that person that can just turn up and just be a lot more confident and a lot cooler about all sorts of stuff. And I really thought it was actually solving a problem in one way or another. If I just do more coke, then I don't appear so drunk. So this is actually solving things.
Yeah.
So it sounds very similar.
Yeah, exactly. So it became this sort of melting pot of mixturing of stuff.
Yeah.
So the bulimia it never went away. It was just pushed to the side.
Yeah.
Because there was no real need for it now.
Yeah.
Because I was achieving the look I wanted through the drugs.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they became now my new thing.
Yeah. Was there excitement? Because I remember when I first discovered that particular kind of drugs, oh God, I was like, this is the best thing in the world. I would tell anybody about it. This is amazing. Use this, try this. It's great.
Yeah, it was interesting because I kind of went face first into them. I never, somebody offered me ecstasy and I just went, okay. I didn't really give it a second thought.
Yeah.
But my group of friends at that time, I kind of slipped away from because they weren't really into it.
Yeah.
And then I made a new group of friends.
Yeah.
And so they were all on the music scene.
Right.
And so now I'm going to clubs and hanging out with DJs and, I wasn't going to like fancy clubs. The dingier, the better for me. If it was an underground club, I thought it was cool. I was obsessed with being cool.
Yeah.
And drugs made me think I was.
Yeah, of course.
Wasn't this little Egypt from the middle of Ireland?
Yeah.
I was now this cool girl on the London scene.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting that, isn't it, where probably around the same time, as you were saying, I was also having similar experiences. I was living in Paris at the time, and for me it was all super important. Everything had to be ultra cool and it had to be one way and not the other. And I like to think of myself also as not being that little idiot who came from this little place in Germany that nobody ever heard of and all the rest of it. No, all of a sudden I'm this cool guy in Paris. And this is the funny thing, where looking back at it today, it's all a bit, how can I put it? It's not that cool really after all. It looked cool, but inside it really wasn't. I really didn't feel as cool as that really inside. It was really that drugs were doing for me what I really couldn't do for myself at that time.
yeah.
So was it similar for you?
Yeah, it was, because that perception of it being cool wasn't, that was all in my head as well. That was all in my stinking thinking. And as much as, yes, there was fun, there was always a come down.
Yeah.
There was always, I'm very aware that I'm probably not answering the question on point. So
No, you're answering
me back if you do. So I was very aware of the come downs and the inner voice that I have that already told me I wasn't good enough and I was stupid was given a megaphone. Once the party was over, the voice was there. And it was just so painful. And I remember going to parties and not wanting to be there because of how I felt about my body. Right? I wasn't binging and virgin at those times, but I still had the shame, the body shame. So I would use to get through that, to give me the spark that I thought I needed, because who I believed then, how I present without drugs and alcohol in me wasn't enough.
Yeah.
That nobody would be interested in that. I wasn't going to be able to entertain is the word that's coming into my head, and there must have been a bit of a show going on.
Yeah.
That if I was just me, then that wouldn't be enough. That would be rejected. They'd see that I was stupid. I wasn't.
Yeah. Now, I suppose, given that question 3 is, what were your worst consequences, and finally your rock bottom? So we were already talking a little bit about consequences early on, because with the bulimia,
Yeah.
You know, the way you felt about your body, the way you felt about yourself, the control and things.
Yeah.
You know. But then I'm assuming with the drinking and the drugs, eventually more consequences came in.
Yeah. And as you say that, then one of my first big consequences was flunking out of uni. Right. Other consequences were never having enough money. I'd have enough money for drugs and alcohol, but I wouldn't have enough money for other things in life, you know.
I always had an empty fridge and, you know, but my pockets full. Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, for sure. And so it was financial consequences, loads of debt, always shifting credit cards around, having to go and ask for help from my parents, you know, spending money that was for other things.
Yeah.
You know, just, and then that brought anxiety as well.
So some more unmanageability there, really.
Yeah, more unmanageability. And then, you know, in my work, like I was quite clever in my work. I got a job where drinking was part of the downtime.
Right.
There's a lot of travel involved in my work, and when I got to my destination, we were popping champagne straight away. Course, we were on the bus to the hotel drinking. So I was in a place where my alcoholism could hide in plain sight because that's what everybody else was doing.
Yeah.
And I kind of set myself up like that too in my crowd, my friend group.
Sure.
So my consequences would probably be that you know, I don't know if I've reached the peak of where I could have been as you know, in my career, because I stayed in a safe job that as much as I loved it, I also loved it for the reason that I could hide.
Yeah.
And then you said, what was my rock bottom? I think my first rock bottom was in 2016. I had, like we were saying earlier, like I had tried to retrain and go into something in well-being. And as part of that process, I was, you know, I was always aware about the amount that I drank was too much and the drugs, like this relaying of addictions. One minute I'm doing something with food, the next minute it's all too much drugs and it's too much alcohol. Then I'm not doing anything. So I kept starting and stopping. So I was always trying to stop.
And you had some awareness there, you said. So you were looking at things coming, going, oh, I'm doing a bit too much of this, or this is causing me trouble and so on. How long was your using period anyway? I mean, we fast forwarded a little bit to 2016. So
yeah, so I started drinking at 17 and 2016, I was 40.
Yeah. Okay.
So I started taking drugs at 19. So I was using all of those three crutches, all of those times, on and off. But I did dry January before it was a thing.
Yeah.
Because I always knew I had I didn't want to admit I had a problem,
right,
but I knew I had a problem.
Right, okay. So if somebody would have said to you, look, I think you've got a problem, you'd have told them to fuck off. But
like my mum did several times, probably from the first year that I was drinking. She could see what I didn't want to see. Yeah. And she was told to fuck off.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
So really early, actually, she saw it.
Yeah, she was very worried about it because, you know, there's people in my family who've suffered with addictions. And probably that's why my parents didn't really drink very much, you know, because they'd seen it around them. Sure. So yeah, when people would say, oh, it's a bit much, but my own internal compass was telling me it was too much. So I would try to be the good girl and to be this perfect thing and stop. And so I'd stop temporarily, but I could never stay stopped. And as soon as I went back, it was always a nightmare. You might get a week or two of normal drinking, but pretty soon it was back to making a show of myself, drinking to blackout, spending more money than I had, you know, calling in sick for work, always coming up with reasons why, oh, how many grannies have died now, you know? So it was kind of this like domesticated addiction thing. Like on the outside, it looked okay. You just, you know, some people may have thought, oh, she's just a bit of a party animal, which of course I thought was cool. Yeah. You know, I was holding it down. I had a job. I had a house. I didn't have a car, thank God, because when I did have a car for like 2 years, I wouldn't drink before I got in the car, but I would get in the car and have a drink and then drive. Yeah. Because stupidly in my head, my addiction had justified that. So, sorry, consequences and rock bottoms was like the slow descent down into, this is not good.
Yeah.
And then my first rock bottom, a friend of mine who I've known from childhood, who's in the rooms as well, she came to visit. And when I'm around her, I don't drink. And I thought that was out of manners. But in hindsight, I believe that was because I didn't want her to see me drinking. And
she might drag you into the rooms.
She might. I never really asked her about the rooms either. You know, I had this like source of loving information at my fingertips, but I kept the struggle to myself. So
I find that fascinating, by the way, I have to say. You know, that you would have something so close there on the one hand and that you would just not interact with it, not look at it.
Yeah, and we're very close. We're really lucky. Like I know, and we both know in a phone call by the way the person says hello, or even by the gaps in between the calls.
Yeah.
Oh, there's something up. And also we have this like parallel life where our lives are very different, but our experiences of what's happening in life seems to run concurrently, which is really beautiful.
Yeah.
So we have always supported each other, but somehow that topic, that bit that I just didn't want to look at, I looked at everything else. I looked at my fitness. I looked at my eating disorder. I didn't want to let go of the drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
You know, I got therapy for my eating disorder. I had loads of therapy. But when I kept trying all these other things to help me get well and not feel like I was a piece of shit, but I was still drinking and drugging on top of it, turning up for therapy sessions, hanging, you know. So,
back to your first rock bottom. Sorry, I took you off.
Yeah. I know, and I'll run with it as well. You'll be like, we don't have enough tape for this conversation. So the first rock bottom was not the first time I tried to stop drinking. I had tried to moderate my drinking many, many times, and it hadn't had any, you know, I thought I could stop. And then when I went back, I'd drink like a lady. You know, you hear people say that. I was one of those people, delusional. So then my friend came over. We went out for dinner. I had a couple of drinks with dinner. Her and my partner at the time didn't drink. Obviously, she doesn't drink. He was driving. And then we went to the cinema. And the cinema, we got in so early, they hadn't started to play the film. So I said, I'll go and see what's happening. But really, I'm thinking I'm going to get a glass of wine here, which is exactly what I did. I got 2 glasses of wine. I had one at the bar and I had another one on the way back to the room. She realised what I was doing and spoke to me about it that evening and said, you know, that's a problem. If you're secret drinking, that's a problem. And I was thinking, she doesn't know the bloody half of it. So I dramatically threw whatever booze was in my house down the drink, which wasn't much because I bought and drank. And then I went to a meeting the next day. And the lady...
Your first meeting ever?
Yeah.
Alone?
Alone. And I heard a chair. I shook. I was so nervous going in. They were lovely and friendly. And I sat down and I heard what I know now was an amazing chair. But at the time, I couldn't identify. This woman had been through everything that you could go through, all the abuses, all the trauma, all the upset, all the abandonment. She'd come out the other side, she'd found recovery and she'd found God. You know, she was very religious in her chair.
Yes.
Kind of turned me off, I'm not going to lie. And I went for about 5 weeks to different meetings. If I was in different countries, I'd go to those meetings. And I didn't get a sponsor. I did have a big book though, and a few phone numbers. And I decided I could do it by myself. So I stopped going to meetings and I didn't drink for 8 months, but I used drugs every second week. And my first sponsor told me, seemingly, that's not being sober. I was very disappointed. So that was my first rock bottom. When I did go back to drinking, it wasn't long ago. So I did 8 months of not drinking. I was using drugs, and then I was at a festival and my first drink was a secret drink at that festival. And then I was off again.
Yeah.
Until the pandemic. So I started the pandemic thinking I was going to not give up, not stop drinking, just give up for a while. So I didn't drink for like 4 months. I thought I was going to learn how to speak Spanish and salsa. I didn't do any of them. Not by myself anyway. And then I went back drinking and it was getting bad.
If you're enjoying this podcast and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe.
I'm trying to juggle 2 jobs now.
Yeah.
but the drinking's creeping in. I'm, you know, I was saying about with the eating disorder, I would go to bed every night and cry and say, I'm not going to do it tomorrow. I'm not going to do it tomorrow. Well, with the drinking, I'd wake up every morning and say, I'm not going to drink today. Or I'm not going to drink till 6 today. Oh, I'm not going to drink till lunchtime today. Some days I managed to not drink, but most days I was drinking.
The moderation battle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been there. It's disheartening.
Oh, it's exhausting.
Crushing.
It's so exhausting. Really is. And then once I had one, I'd go to one shop for a bottle of wine or another shop for a bottle of wine. And I think I wasn't under the influence, it's just, and then wake up the next day and try again. So whilst I'm having this battle, a friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, who I hold very dear in my heart, she's in the rooms now. She's getting sober. She's talking about recovery. I'm sitting in her house drinking. She's, she never drank anyway, but I'm drinking and using, and she's talking about recovery, and she's growing and glowing. And here I am looking washed out and struggling. And I'm thinking, I want a bit of that. What am I doing? Like, am I going to keep on doing this? Yeah. So, not straight away, obviously. Then another person came into my life, some guy from 10 years ago that I met in like another country at some festival off my face. He got in touch randomly. He's in recovery.
Right.
What the hell? So I really believe that's where I feel my higher power
sending your messages
coming in. It was like, hello, see all these people you thought were cool, they're now in recovery. So he encouraged me to go to this meeting. It was an online meeting. It was in Miami and it was wild. Everyone was really friendly and fun and I'm very American. It was so much fun. Yeah. And I thought, I'm not sure about that. And like the rock, I know you asked me about the rock bottom and I'm talking about recovery, but the rock bottom was the managing, the trying to manage the drink and the like noticing that there was absolutely no control over that now.
Yeah.
And the knowing that I was at a point where if I didn't do something about my drinking and my using, I was going to lose everything. That like this new career I was trying to carve out for me, I was living a double life. There's no way I could carry on being so insincere and then working in well-being, trying to help people with their addictions when I'm an addict. Like the irony of it.
Yeah.
So I could see then this light in other people, and that was my opportunity to take a leap of faith.
Yeah. And come into recovery.
Yeah, that attraction, not promotion, right? I could see this person living her normal life. Yeah. As much as it was normal in the pandemic, but Yeah, and I thought, I'm going to try.
Yeah. Interesting. Really interesting. I mean, a word about rock bottoms anyway, because it's one of those things that is maybe a little bit overhyped or somewhat cliched as well. Not everybody has a rock bottom. I personally did have one, where I ended up in hospital and so on, and other people I've spoken to as well, once you're in a jail cell or in those instances where you feel at your lowest and you might want to call that rock bottom. Other people don't have them at all. Other people have many small ones. I mean, it's slightly sort of, I suppose, overhyped.
I think it's very personal as well. Yeah. And I think sometimes, you're right. Some people are, it's a bit like, it doesn't have to be that dramatic. No. For me, I was in tens of thousands of pounds of debt. I had a bright future ahead that I was going to fuck up. I had tried so many times to manage and maintain my drinking. And I had been trying to do something about it. So my rock bottom was all of that combined, and then this little glimmer, this light of hope, this little ray of sunshine on the sofa showing me a way. Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful. Question 4 is, did you ever want to die? Did you consider suicide at your worst?
No, I didn't. Thank God I didn't. But I think in a way I was slowly killing myself with all of those things that I've been doing for all of those years, like nearly, 30 years of abuse.
It's a sort of suicide in installments, that what I always used to call it.
I was certainly killing my spirit and my soul on a daily basis, but no, I never felt like that. And I think because I was always open to therapy and outside help, which I'm a real advocate for, and you know, I tried to keep myself physically as well as possible. Like, so I did have help to not get there. Left to my own devices, who knows, right?
Yeah, but you had other things that were sort of positive and healing influences in your life.
Yeah.
That perhaps kept you away from that spot.
Yeah, like a shitload of therapy.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And loving relationships. Like I've always been very blessed, and I foster those relationships with my friends and my family. They're really important to me.
Yeah. I think that place that often gets spoken about on this podcast of wanting to die is often also really about isolation. And if you can manage to stay away from that, then you've got a better chance of not really having to go there emotionally or in any other way, of course. Yeah, absolutely. Question 5, and we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but let's elaborate a bit, is what other methods did you try to get sober before finding the room? So this would apply also, I suppose, to your bulimia as well as to drinking and using.
Yeah. Gosh, probably easier to say what I didn't try. I tried therapy. I tried a dietitian for the food stuff.
Did that have an effect?
No, I don't think I was ready. And then when I was ready at 30, this was kind of the beginning of my journey of trying to of my wellness stuff. I got CBT with the NHS, which was really helped me with the actions of the bulimia stuff. So got me out of the binging and purging and gave me tools to deal with, but didn't get deep enough.
Yeah.
Still had those old self-beliefs, still had those defects of character, perfectionism and judgmentalism. And
but it helped you curb the purging?
Yes. So then I stopped binging and purging, but now I'm still drinking and using, right?
Yeah.
So I had different types of therapy on and off. I leaned into my sporty side. So I would sign up for half marathons. I did one marathon, never again. It was a terrible experience. Spent the second half going, when this is over, you never have to do another marathon again. And then went straight to the bar. I tried hypnotherapy. I thought it was my thinking. I read a lot of self-help books.
Yeah.
I did some kind of like life coaching skills. I don't want to say the name of it, but there's a specific one that I went to and got really involved in that. Some people say it's a cult. I didn't think it was, but I was delusional. Who knows? But that actually really helped me to see parts of me. So it was like I was doing, my sponsor always uses this phrase, which I love. It's a scooping out process. So I'd started the scooping out process at 30.
Yeah.
While still drinking and using. And then, you know, I did some extreme sports things. Each thing I was doing was almost, you know, I've heard people say this in the rooms as well, to try to prove that I wasn't an addict. I would try to be really good at other stuff. Did big charity events, you know, got involved in loads of things. And then all the while stopping and starting. And then I went into train to for an area in well-being, and I thought, well, you know, if at the end of this course I just have a better connection with myself, then maybe that, you know, that'd be good. That'll help me. But still drinking and using. I stopped and started throughout my training, but I would always go back to it. So yeah, I mean, I've tried so many things, and they would help temporarily, and they helped with that scooping out process that I would get like to a deeper level of self-awareness and understanding. But it was, I think my sister said this to me. She was like, you looked at every area in your life, but you just weren't looking at the bits that you really need to look at, you know. It was like here, like in play, just out of sight. Like I knew it was there. I know my hand is to the right of my head right now, but I didn't want to look at it. I didn't want to engage with it. I didn't know how to.
There's a sort of theme here, slowly but surely developing. You know, so you ran a marathon, I ran a half marathon. We had someone on here who ran a half marathon, but also ran a 10K with Coke in her bum bag. So there is a running kind of theme coming, you know, to this question, to question 5. I think exercise is something that we all try to a degree. Sometimes Yeah, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, I think because we're quite all or nothing people, aren't we? And like, I was always a very active child. Sport I was doing sports from like 8 years old. I was always sporty. And because I was dyslexic, I never really excelled at sport either, but I loved it. It gave me those good, endorphins. And I think that's something we chase as addicts.
Yeah.
We chase those feel-good feelings. My inner message was, you're a piece of shit, nobody loves you. And by the way, you're stupid. So when I was doing stuff like that, it made me feel good.
Yeah.
So of course we're going to run and rush it. Did I do coke after my marathon? No, I think I drank mojitos instead. Probably couldn't get any.
I'm not sure if that really belongs to the sort of really good sort of post-marathon routine there, but
I wouldn't recommend it.
no, probably not. So when you came into the rooms, and that's our question 6, did you struggle with the word God?
I did struggle with the word God, even though I'm brought up Catholic, and I used the word higher power until I was comfortable. I would say my spiritual beliefs, when I was brought up Catholic, was like, that's what you did. You went to Mass, you went to communion, you went to confirmation, you did all those things. And I kind of stopped going to Mass maybe at like 15. And then I know I'm going off point, so I'm going to reel myself back to the point. I did struggle with the word God because I just wasn't comfortable to use it yet. To me, it meant the Catholic Church.
So what did that evoke exactly then? For me, for instance, it was punishing, right? That was the biggest problem for me, was that it felt punishing and not supportive, not present for me.
Yeah, I mean, we had to go to confession as very young children, 7 or 8, and tell the priest our sins. And we had a really lovely priest, so I used to tell him the same 3 sins. I fought with my brother, I dishonoured my mother, and I did one other thing, whatever I made up at the point, right? And he'd go, for these and all the other sins you are forgiven. He was lovely, but some of them maybe not so much. But in the religion, it was like, you're right, it was punishing. And there was a lot of like, I'm being watched and I have to be on my best behaviour. So I kind of had disassociated myself from that. I had taken, do to others, treat others as you'd like to be treated. And then I'd kind of gone down my own sort of spiritual, esoteric style path with, chakras and the energy of the universe and stuff like that. So I was comfortable with higher power. And my sponsor didn't use the word God for the first few months. And then she started slipping it in.
Here and there.
Yeah, and I was able to mould that into my own, my own personal understanding of what that word meant. Some people say good orderly direction, but, it was like, it doesn't have to be Catholic or Islamic or whatever. It's just, it's that golden thread that connects us all, that whatever my higher power is personal to me. It doesn't have to represent that old God.
Yeah, but it doesn't sound like it was a hurdle at any point.
The higher power thing wasn't a hurdle. I feel like I've had those little God nods, those little taps throughout my life. I've been very lucky and very blessed. And I've had what others might call coincidences, but I feel are like those little nuggets of gold along the path that show you're going the right way.
Which is our question 7, really, which is, how do you experience your higher power, or what are your God moments?
I wish I'd written these down. My God moments are...
Or how do you experience your higher power?
I experience it in different ways. I hear my higher power through the love and kindness in other people, or sometimes through, I remember someone saying to me, I was annoyed about somebody not getting me ice cream when I had COVID. And they're like, you need to get a better perspective. Like, you could have just got it off delivery, So for me, God comes in through the voice of others, through the message in the rooms. Sometimes it comes in a 2-way prayer. I do that sometimes. That's an old AA tradition.
For those people and those listeners who don't know what that is, a 2-way prayer, do you want to quickly explain it?
Right. Well, this is my version of it, so don't quote me on it. But so what I'm sure there's links online. I meditate a little bit and think about what is it that I would like some guidance on.
Yeah.
And I ask the question. And then I take a few deep breaths and I just pause with pen and paper and I write whatever comes into my mind.
Stream of consciousness.
The first couple of times I did it, it didn't even sound like how I speak or how I word things. It was just this lovely, loving, kind, but straight talking. Like my higher power doesn't take any, like my higher power is very...
Sounds like an Irish streak there,
it's
loving but straight talking.
Direct, tells it how it is, firm but fair. So it's like I asked about relationships and it said, well, you're looking in all the wrong places, You keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same results. So here's what I'm going to tell you to do. Take your time. I'll bring love into your life and you'll know when it's true. It's that kind of voice that's like a nice wise auntie, And my higher power shows up in other ways. A lot of times, like I'll think about somebody and they'll call straight away or they will cross paths or, those little nuances in life that make me think, isn't that lovely? Isn't that lovely sense of connection?
Yeah.
How do I feel it in myself? Is in with peace. I know I'm connected to my higher power when I'm present and I'm kind and I'm loving, and I'm humorous.
Yeah.
Life isn't quite so stiff.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. When I have this terrible tendency that when I lose contact, everything gets incredibly serious. Everything is just dead serious. I'm dead serious. The world is dead serious. Everything is just, what I do is very serious. And so I know when I disconnect and also then therefore when I connect and I sort of literally almost light up,
Yeah. And I think that, so I always say my inner voice, so I've got like the loving higher power, warm one, the nice auntie. That's like the little, do you know that Dolmio ad? I'm not sure that there's other pasta sauces available.
Absolutely.
But like characters who are warm and loving, and then the other, my negative voice, the more critical one, the one that's probably more of my disease, is the woman from Chicken Run.
Okay.
Have you seen that movie? And she's got like a really tight bun and she's very severe and she carries a hatchet and she's always trying to murder the poor chickens.
We're talking about, I'm loving this, is really brilliant, we are using sort of references from, what is it, an animation and a commercial. I have to say that, you sort of stolen my thunder here a little bit. What with my Italian heritage, I suppose my higher power should speak to me through an ad, with Italian accent like this, Silvio, this, that, the other.
Well, that little Dolmio and the granny, she's so kind and loving and sweet, isn't she? So she's trying to nurture people with her big bowl of warm pasta, whereas the Chicken Run lady, not the same.
No.
I would even notice when I was in my critical, feeling bad about myself, I would do my hair like her subconsciously.
Wow.
I would have this super tight bun that almost made you give you brain cream.
Yeah.
So by being able to put a character to them, I'm able to go, oh no, we're not going to engage in that today. Let's listen to the kind. Let's tune that out and tune into the loving one. Tune into the little voice that might be quieter deep down inside. Yeah. That's saying something that's actually going to be probably for your good. Something that's going to bring you to a warmer place.
Yeah.
The sunlight is a spirit, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah. Love how they're both female as well.
Yes.
Stereotypes, if you will, both voices.
Interesting.
Yeah, lovely. So our question 8, and I'm very fond of it as well, is which parts of the steps were the most difficult for you? I think we all struggle in one way or another with certain parts of the program, don't we? And most famously for me, of course, was, step 4. I know it's not always the same for everybody. I know there's a lot of people who said, oh, I loved it. I could just write down all my resentments. I personally didn't like it because obviously I would have to look at my part, and I really didn't want to do that. So which parts of the steps did you find most difficult?
Well, I do identify with the step 4 thing. Like, I was happy to write down, and then she said this, who did that? How dare they even think that about me? Like, I'd been writing step 4s unwittingly way before.
Yeah.
Drunken letters of hate that never got sent.
Yeah.
And I did pause when it got to the point where I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to make amends to that person. Oh no. And then stopped writing.
Yeah.
But I took it back up. So, yeah, that wasn't the most difficult part for me. I think and step 5 was a beautiful process. You know, my sponsor was such a loving lady. You know, she just put me at ease. I was able to relay that back to her. It was gorgeous. So 6, 7 and 8 were pretty okay, you know. I'm quite good at assessing myself and pointing out my defects, and then, you know, realising that instead of being judgmental, I should be accepting. Instead of being passive aggressive, I should be direct, you know. But yeah, I would say the most difficult one was step 9.
The amends process.
The amends process, you know, going to those people that I had hurt in the past and, you know, being humble, asking for an audience with them. Some people I hadn't spoken to for years. Couple of people I hadn't spoken to for years, and to my family, you know, my parents and my siblings, and my dad was very cute, as he always is, and was like, well, you're doing great now, and I love you, and you're a great girl, and I'm really proud of you. And then that was the end of that conversation. It was, you know, quick. And my mum, who I'm very close to, maybe, you know, as I said, I think I said earlier, like, we could be a bit codependent, so I'm really trying to work on that. But she was just so, you could see, like, I can feel myself getting upset now, but you can see, like, the stress of worrying about her children, all of us, right? Because she worries about all of us, but especially those of us who are addicts. And you could see that lift. And I think I told her around Christmas time that I was in recovery, and she said, oh, that's the best present that you could give me. Yeah. But the hardest ones were my ex and a girl I'd known for a very long time, who, of course, it was her fault that our relationship broke down and not mine.
Of course.
And when I went to, you know, I kept having these lovely nuggets of gold, but the process was going, meeting her, having a conversation, telling her where I was at, you know, apologising for what had happened. Well, making amends, not saying I'm sorry, but like doing the proper amends process. And, you know, she smiled at me whilst I was doing it. And my inner judge went, oh, stupid cow, she's already laughing at me. Yeah. And I was like, I see you're smiling. And she said, yeah, I've stopped drinking too. And she had stopped drinking more or less around the same time as I had. And she used a different process to get sober, because there's other flavours of recovery.
Yeah. With no monopoly on it.
We don't have a monopoly on it. But it was just so beautiful to be able to sit there with this person who, you know, when I resent people, I resent them hard. They live rent-free in my head. I like to have my friends agree with how much of an arsehole the other was and not look at me. So for me to be able to take responsibility and clear away that debris and reconnect with somebody, you know, was beautiful. And the surprise, the gift, the nugget of gold was, oh, she's sober too now. So now we do stuff sober. Yeah. Do all the stuff we used to do before, but we do it sober. Yeah. And then I had to go to Tesco because I had a pawn shown for scanning the wrong stuff at the self-checkout. Like, I paid for a lot of onions when it was really lovely bits of fish. Yeah. And silly stuff like that. But, you know, it's still theft at the end of the day. So I was very nervous about going to my local Tesco to do that. And when they got a manager to come on the tannoy, and this great big dude came, and I thought, oh, here we go. I was saying my step 3 prayer and my serenity prayer over and over. God. So I said, I'm here on a quest. And I explained what I was doing. And he just looked at me and he was like, And I got to the end of it and I was like, so, you know, this is how I'm going to make the amends. And I'd brought money to pay for what I thought would be, you know, a substantial amount. And he said, I'm not going to take your money. And I was like, oh God, he's going to arrest me. And
the Tesco manager.
That's going to get arrested in Tesco in front of all the area. And he said, I understand. He said, when this was obviously during the pandemic. He said, I too was struggling in the pandemic. And he, again, had gone another way and got help and got sober.
Right.
And he said, so I really appreciate your honesty. He said, so all I want you to do is to promise you won't do it again. Yeah. I said, I won't. And I'll give this money to the charity that helped you. Yeah. He said, now I'm going to walk you out. Right. And he gave me a big hug.
Oh, it's not.
And he said, good luck. Yeah. And I was like, thank you, God, for showing up and showing that person, giving anybody. Oh, he also said, it's my last day in this store.
Was it?
He was moving on to another store.
Wow.
So I can go back there and I won't see him. I kind of want to see him.
Yeah.
But, I didn't have to worry about.
But from his perspective also, just sorry to interrupt there, but from his perspective also, it's his last day at this job, which is probably going to feel weird in one way or another. As you're always closing a book, aren't you? Or a chapter and everything. And on the last day of his job at that place, this woman turns up and kind of says, look, I have this problem. And here's X amount of money for what I've done and all the rest of it. And here's my amends, and you end up with a big hug. That must have been a brilliant last day for him.
Yeah. He was like, I'm in this other store, but it was like, that was the end of where we were to be. And
lovely.
It was just, because I was so nervous about doing that, it's like, that's where God shows up for me.
Yeah.
And then if we have time for one more.
We do, yeah, plenty.
I can feel myself already getting emotional, and I am a bit of a crier, so I'm going to try and hold it together for
No, you feel free. We have had tears here before.
Yeah.
Always welcome.
So the most difficult one. Oh, the bath is overflowing. The most difficult one was my ex.
Right.
And
had you already been separated by this point?
Yes.
Right.
So we had been together for about 6 years on and off.
Right.
And we were possibly going to get married. We were heavily he would use at the weekends, and he didn't really drink during the week, but I was always, I'm in my relaying, right? I'm either on a diet pill now, or drinking during the week, or using at the weekend, or even using during the week, whatever. I didn't really care. So our relationship was peppered with addiction, heavily salted, I'd say, with addiction for my end mostly, but he was like a weekend warrior. But then our relationship was also difficult in other ways. We weren't great communicators, blah, blah, blah. But when it ended, I blamed it all on him. And I never really trusted him, when really I was the one who couldn't be trusted. And I had so much resentment for him. If his name was mentioned, my friends knew to agree to all the negativity, I would say, and to back me up. And when we broke up, I told him I didn't want anything to do with him, and I hadn't seen him for years. I had no communication with him. And there was, he was another one on step 4. When it got to him, I was like, well, he can fuck off.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be saying sorry to him because he's the problem, not me. But I saw in that process, that I was jealous, I was insecure, I was manipulative. I used him as an excuse to use.
Yeah.
And also, I used him for other things, like cheap accommodation and access to drugs. So, using men for my personal gain was one of my defects. So anyway, here I go to do my step 9 to this person that I've been, dedicated to hating for quite a while. And when
facing.
Oh, yeah.
That.
I sent him the message and he responded straight away, absolutely. So I went to see him. He gave me a huge hug. He was all the cute, loving parts of himself that I loved. And I made my amends for all of my behaviours. And he too was going through his own process, not an addiction again, working on himself. We're all working on ourselves. We're all people of a certain age now. Thank God we're working on ourselves, right? And it was so lovely. And now I'm able to be free of all of that hate that was ill-directed. I'm able to be free of the guilt and the shame, and to have we're connected. I don't see him regularly, but I might see him once or twice a year for a cup of coffee. That's more than enough. I would like him to have success and love and peace in his life now, which is the opposite.
Yeah.
So what was the most difficult part? Like calling someone up on the bus on the way there, going, I don't know what to say. And she said, well, you've got to say. I was manipulative. I was jealous. I was insecure. I used you. And I was like, oh God, I have to use all those big words when I thought I was perfect, you know. But I'm so glad I did it.
Yeah.
So glad I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what sometimes what you think is going to be the worst, the most painful, the most difficult part of recovery is the one you get the most benefit from.
Undoubtedly so. I got most out of the one thing I really didn't want to do, that I really don't want to, and again, getting tongue-tied just thinking and talking about it, which is the one thing I really didn't want to do, which was to look at my own part in all those numerous resentments that I had. So many about so many things towards certain people, things, and so on, but also towards my main one, of course, being, towards God. And that was my biggest deal, right? And my biggest entry on step 4. I did a whole step 4 just on that. And to be free then, once I'd looked at my own part in all of this, and once I had made my amends, to be free of those poisons, the inside poisons of those just the continuous rants that was going on in my head at all times about this, that, and the other, about that person, what they'd done and how they treated me wrong. Just that freedom is priceless.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful.
Absolutely priceless.
Question 9. Which character defects give you most trouble? Big smile here.
Well, I've mentioned about 3 times already. Perfectionism, I would say, used to be number 1. I think judgmentalism is number 1. So judgmental of myself and others. I feel like you wouldn't know I was pissed off at you because I'll, in the moment, think, oh, that wasn't right. And I may not say, because sometimes I don't know if it's the right thing to say it or not. And then I'll go away and I'll be resentful. So my expectation is that the other person shouldn't say that, or should be more sensitive to me, or didn't consider it's all me, isn't it? So when I'm judging others, it's because they haven't lived up to an expectation that I wanted them to have in their way of treating me or seeing me. Maybe they've said something that's tapped on one of my insecurities. So that's the one. And I listened to this lovely recording about the Serenity Prayer, that call to action that the Serenity Prayer is, and that, when we're in resentment, we're in judgment. We're in judgment of others and of how things aren't the way we expect them to be. And it's like, it says, I wish these were my words, but it says, when you're in resentment, think, who am I judging now? And then you're able to think, well, what am I doing? So you bring it back to you. Oh, I'm being judgmental. What should I do instead? Be accepting. Shift my perspective. So that one's definitely a tough one. The perfectionism, I'm not perfect. I think I should be perfect. But I know I'm far from perfect. I'm definitely working on that one. I find that one does show up, but it's something that I've progressed on over the years of being in sobriety, which is great. Because having the tools is great, isn't it? That we can, we can work on that. And wanting to get things right. Like we've been saying this on and off the recording, haven't we? Like this pressure and expectation we put on ourselves to do everything in such a, to be perfect and to do everything in such a way. It's this need to get it right,
Yeah, and the wish for it to be seamless and effortless, just as if it sort of everything comes out perfectly at all times.
Yeah, and that's ego as well, isn't it? Like that's me thinking that, again, if I'm those things, I'll be enough. But it's ego driven. It's wanting to feed my ego. It's all about ego. Somebody says the thing that upsets me because I think they think I'm stupid. It's ego.
Yeah, of course.
It's just driven. I used to think I had no ego at all. Quite the opposite. It's huge.
Oh, I could have given you a whole, what I would have thought of like being somewhat enlightened talk about ego, while I'm drinking and using, and I've got it all figured out, It's all bullshit, really, Certainly was at the time.
That sounds much more intelligent than me. When I used to get drunk and high, I was obsessed with talking about boxing and Barry McGuigan for some reason, something which I know very, very little about. But
yeah, well, I knew very little about, how to smash my ego at that time.
Yeah.
I can tell you so.
Yeah.
Question 10. What is the best thing recovery has given you?
Oh, gosh. The smile on my face back. The genuine, that, glow. Like we're saying about the process and the defects, and when you do the amends process, that's when you start to see the light in people's eyes, isn't it? When they've freed themselves from their own chains. It's given me back confidence in myself, and it's given me a sense of grounding. Those tools are really important to help me get back into the reality, the facts of what's happening. It's given me quite a lot, really. Like, I'm still in the same job. My other side hustle is going really well. So it's given me clarity to be able to do that, you know, and connection. I think connection with other people actually be the top thing for me, you know, to not need drugs and alcohol to go into a room and feel like I can feel others' energy, you know, to be present for others. Yeah.
Lovely. Lovely. Question 11. What would you say to a newcomer or someone wondering if they're an addict?
And now the words of a man, when I went to my first meeting second time round, he said, "Oh, how long have you been in the rooms?" And I said, "Oh, well, this is my first time." And I said, "I'm not sure I'm an addict." And he said, "Well, it's better to be not sure in here than not sure out there." And he pointed to the street. And I thought, you know what, that's right. Like, if you're questioning it, if you've tried to stop and, you know, you're trying to moderate, like we were saying, if there's just that feeling of like, I don't want to use the one word unmanageability because that's such a recovery word, isn't it? Yeah. It's like, if you know deep down if it's a problem or not, you know, come and try it. You're not, there's going to be no harm in trying it. Come and give it a go. You don't have to tell anybody. You can just come here and try it for yourself. And be open to the process. Like, I wish people told you how much love and joy there was in recovery and how much freedom. Because I thought it was a death sentence. Yeah, I thought it was like a long prison sentence, that life was going to be really dull and boring. And actually, it's even fuller than it ever was. You know, I'm doing all those other things I used to do and more. Yeah, just give it a go.
Wonderful. And the last question, question 12. What do you want your higher power to say to you, quote, at the pearly gates?
Come on in. The tea's on. God. Yeah, God, what do I want you to say to me? Well, this must be the answer because, again, I can feel it's touching on that emotional thing. Like, I always think your soul is trying to tell you something when I feel that emotion, and it's like, you're doing all right, kid. Yeah. You did okay.
Yeah. You did more than okay today. Thank you so much for coming around, Fiona. It's been such a pleasure to have you here. And thank you for sharing a great message and for the honesty and the courage. Thank you so much for being my guest on 12 Steps and 12 Questions today.
It's my absolute pleasure to be of service. Thank you for asking me. It's been lovely.
Thank you. We're still rolling. Do you feel you said everything that you want to say, or was there anything that you left out? Anything where you kind of go, "Oh, I wish I had said that"?
I don't even know what I did say. No, I mean, again, maybe in an hour's time when I'm going to try not to rake over it with the fine tooth comb. But was there anything you'd like to change? Or
no. I always think that it's good to have at the end to have a quick thing of just checking in with each other. You know, to satisfy, because sometimes I have had situations where someone might have said, "Well, actually, I really wanted to actually get this bit in," or, you know, I have a message for the newcomer that I didn't really get in, or something like that. You know, so it's just nobody has to. I just wanted to give it that.
Yeah. Do you know what? When we were doing it, there was a couple of times I was thinking, oh God, I've definitely gone off topic here now. I hope I actually answered the question. So if you find that I didn't answer the question, that was that.
You answered all of them beautifully.
Yeah, get me back in and I'll try and stay on point. I really enjoyed the process. Good. And then there was this other part of me that was like, oh, maybe I should ask you some questions back. Like, I feel like, did I take too much space?
No.
Overanalyzing.
No, you are the guest. You are the guest, and that is why you answer the questions. One day I will answer the questions myself.
Okay.
Right. Well. Thank you so much again.
We've come to the end of this episode. Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed it and would like other addicts and alcoholics to hear it, then please make the pesky AIs and algorithms work their 12th step. Hit like and subscribe. While this pod is based on the 12-Step Recovery Program, it's not officially affiliated with any 12-Step fellowship. 12 Steps and 12 Questions is not substance or behavior specific, it's fully self-supporting and not for profit. And you know this next bit, It's not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization or institution. It does not wish to engage in any controversy, and it neither endorses nor opposes any causes.